Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Labor Live at 12:05. That is right. Labor Live at 12:05 is back for Labor Month, a month where we look and talk about all things union. So this week, the first week of Labor Month, is all about history. And this year, we're doing something a little bit different. We're really diving into the depths of our own history, the history of Alaska's labor movement and the history of actually the Alaska AFL-CIO. So we have probably the best guest to have on when it comes to all things labor history here in Alaska, and that is my esteemed colleague, Kimberly Hayes, the political director here at the Alaska AFL-CIO. Kim, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex. I'm excited to talk about what we've been doing in preparation for today.
Yeah, so usually when we talk about labor history, we're always talking about when the AFL and the CIO merged back in 1947 or 1953. I can't quite remember my dates, but this year we did something special and we went to the archives. Now I know you're thinking at home, the archives, Nicolas Cage, some sort of elaborate plan to discover something secret about the labor movement. Well, it's not quite as cool, but it is very cool. We went to the archives at the UAA library, and little did I know, that there are actually so many historic documents about Alaska's labor movement. And we actually took a little bit of a video that we're actually going to premiere now, and then we're going to discuss a little bit about kind of the highlights of what we found in some of the archives that we looked at. So let's watch this quick video about our journey to the UAA Labor Archives.
Hey everybody, the Alaska AFL-CIO staff is on a field trip today. We're at the UAA Consortium Library Archives. I don't know if you know this, but they have a ton of labor archives in there, and we're about to find out what exactly they have. We know they have some archives about the Alaska AFL-CIO. They have some archives about people in history who were big labor leaders. We don't know what we're going to find, but we're really excited. So we just left the UAA Consortium Library Archives. We spent 3 hours with Lorena Showers' papers that she donated to the UAA Consortium Library Archives. Amazing stuff. This woman was called the Grand Lady of Labor. She came to Alaska in the 40s, hit the ground running, organizing workers, waitresses, hotel workers, bartenders. We learned that she was the secretary-treasurer of our own organization. Didn't know that until today. She spent a lot of time writing about labor, and we were lucky enough today to come away with a book she wrote and published using all union labor. 50 years living, working, and volunteering in Anchorage, Alaska by Lorena Showers. 50-year member of Unite Here Local 878, a union that's still going strong today. Look at this, folks. Look at that. You can't get better than that on the back of a book, right? So stay tuned for more stuff that we're going to find. We're just really excited to dig into this.
I mean, we had so much fun, and we dug into 4 boxes. It took us about an hour a box. I mean, there were so many intricate notes, like memos that Lorena Showers had written. So what were kind of some of your big takeaways about the history of the AFL-CIO or our movement in kind of looking at her documents?
Sure. One of the takeaways is, we talked about this at the beginning, we don't know what we don't know. The only thing that the people in this office knew about Lorena Showers before we stumbled upon this collection was we have one of her awards in our closet that has been stored here. We didn't understand what it meant until we went to UAA and dug through the archives. All of the documents were donated after she passed away. And we learned so much about our own history, and of course, Unite Here Local 878's history, because that was her home union. But one thing that just shocked me, and Alex will talk a little bit more about this, is how many women were involved in the formation of the Territorial Federation of Labor and the labor movement, writ large. One of the things we talk about in the labor movement is equality, right? One of the ways for men and women to make the same amount of money is to have a collective bargaining agreement, have a contract, because it doesn't matter your gender. In the lower 48, I don't think there was as much equity as what we're seeing in the 1940s in the labor movement in Alaska. There were women serving in elected positions in the Alaska Federation of Labor, which is now known as the Alaska State AFL-CIO. Now, of course, we will point out that the work they were doing in the labor movement, in the unions, they were laundresses, they were waitresses, what you would call, typical work for a woman, but they were in positions of leadership, making decisions alongside men. So that was really interesting to discover.
Yeah, like look at this photo right here. This is a photo of the first elected officials of the Territorial Alaska Federation of Labor. There's more women here than men, which I think that is such a surprising find, I think.
Yeah, and it's great.
Find.
Another unique thing about Alaska. The other thing is Lorena knew a lot about the history of labor even before her time coming to Alaska. So she came in the 40s, and like I said in the video, she hit the ground running. By 43, she was involved in all of organized labor. But she took time to research what came before her. So she wrote in her book, which you have a copy. I bought a copy because, again, having a book that says Union Yes on the back is pretty amazing. But she details in there about the mining action going on and how Seattle locals came to Alaska to organize. And one thing we really enjoyed reading about, we know what our values are. We know what we fight for and our principles. And they talk about in the book that really, what was it they were focusing on was jobs in Alaska for people who live in Alaska, because, Alaska wasn't a state yet. And so Seattle was kind of controlling all the locals in Alaska, and they felt neglected. Of course, it's far away. And so that fight for local control, local hire in the different industries, timber, fishing. And so it's not so different as today. So that was really interesting to see what brought them all together and to form a territorial federation of labor here in Alaska. I really appreciated reading about the values that they held.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really interesting too, because you think, obviously there was union activity in Alaska far preceding the Territorial Federation of Labor, right? There were unions that were organizing, and they were bargaining contracts. So unions were very active, but there wasn't that formal Federation of Labor that we have today. And I can't remember who the guy was that Lorena was writing about, but his pitch was basically, hey, because we don't have an AFL-CIO, we don't have a building trades. There's no building trades council, which is usually the place where unions get to dictate the terms of contracts on big construction projects. So the building trades councils that were negotiating all those things, they were all from Seattle. So that was kind of like that big push of, hey, we need to have our own Federation of Labor so we can write the rules of these contracts, because guess what? I mean, the construction boom of the 1940s and post-World War II was massive. So it's kind of cool to see that was like the driving force for actually formalizing the AFL-CIO up here.
Yeah, and why would you not want Seattle locals dictating the terms? Well, the cost of living in Alaska is high now, and it was high then, and they were getting paid Seattle rates, and that just didn't work for the people. Especially after the gold rush in Alaska, they said, okay, we got to figure out how to make this place sustainable for working people. And the other thing I found really interesting is, I assumed this, but I didn't really know this. And nowadays, organized labor is integral to a lot of different legislative action or political things. It was the same way then. Organized labor was really involved in the fight for statehood. They were involved in building the pipeline, of course, we all know that. And they were involved in rebuilding after the '64 earthquake. So organized labor has been at the table for a lot of important historical events or fights in Alaska, which made me feel really good about the work we're doing, is that we're not veering too far off course what those original founders of our AFL wanted us to do, which was be at the forefront of really big issues that affect working people.
Mm-hmm. And I think the only mystery that really remains from our time to the archives, so I think we're going to have to go back, Kim. We learned that the Alaska AFL-CIO did not become the name, the Alaska AFL-CIO, until the 70s, far after we were a territory and far after the American Federation of Labor merged with the Congress of Industrialized Organizations to form the AFL-CIO. So we were still the Alaska Federation of Labor for like 20 years after they had joined the CIO. So we'll have to do some more digging about
change can take a lot of time. Change can take a lot of time.
Change can take time. But as we're kind of discussing this history, Kim, I'm kind of interested in your perspective. Why is it so important that we kind of really take time to think back on our own history? Why is that important?
Yeah, I think everybody's heard this before, but knowing history is important to the future of whatever you're doing. You don't want to repeat the same mistakes. You want to learn from the past, of course. But I think right now in this moment of time, something that we all need to remember, we forget that the benefits that we're enjoying as union members or as working people didn't exist out of the ether. They were not just given, they were fought for. And we're watching at the federal level, we see federal employees getting their rights to collectively bargain completely stripped unconstitutionally, but it's still happening. We hear about the presidential administration wanting to roll back OSHA, which is something we fought really hard for. So the rights that we're enjoying, they're not something we can just lay back and say, well, they're never going to do anything about that.
Right.
People like Lorena, who, just to point this out about her, she helped get the first union health program in our state. She sat at the table and negotiated that. So before that, healthcare was not part of your, your CBA. It didn't exist. And so that's relatively recent in, history of time. And it could go away in a blink of an eye if we're not continuing to educate people about the benefits that unions bring to the workplace for union members and non-union members. We're likely to start seeing more losses because we won't have the fight in us to protect these rights. We just passed a higher minimum wage, which paid sick leave. Like, these are things that we're doing to continue the progress that they started at the turn of the century. And we can't just sit back and say, well, we've got what we've got. We don't need to worry about it going away. So that's one thing. It also, on the good side, it makes you realize that you're part of a much larger labor movement. If you're a union member and you really only know about your own union, you might not know the history of that union and how they were involved in organized labor in the 40s. I'm learning a lot about Unite Here Local 878 and how there were locals all over the state, not just Local 878. And so knowing about that, you feel these people with you when you're doing these things. You can think about how they were approaching it and how you're approaching it. So you're a part of a bigger thing, and it is really moving.
Yeah, very powerful. And I think sometimes it can really be frustrating living in the now, thinking, man, like, why are these things happening right now? And then when you really look back at history, you kind of realize that a lot of the issues we're dealing with now, they're the same, fundamental pressures that workers faced back then. It's the same issues. It's the same fight. And you can kind of use that, I think, motivation to continue to go forward. So yes. Folks at home, history. Very, very important. And we still have so many more boxes to go back to. So special shout out to the UAA Consortium Library, public library, by the way. So if you're interested in visiting the labor archives, I would definitely recommend. When I say the labor archives, it's not a labor archive. There are just labor documents in the archives. But it sounds cooler to say labor archives, I would say. But yeah, definitely check out the UAA Consortium Library. They have so many documents. I know we're going to go back because we haven't even opened the AFL-CIO.
Our own box. Right.
Our own box, yeah. We got more work to do, so we're going to have to do another Labor Live here in the future about our own documents, and I am excited to see what history we will uncover then.
And I'm hoping, Alex, by doing things like this, there are people watching. Now, I can say, reading this book, there are people in this book from Lorena Showers that I know personally. So again, this isn't, BCE we're talking about. This is in the 1900s, which I was born in the 1900s. There are people that were integral in the labor movement who are in this book. And if you're watching and you have more information you want to share, unique tidbits about the history of the AFL-CIO in Alaska or your local union, please send it to us, because the more we're learning, the deeper we're getting into the archives. And like Alex said, while we were there, we noticed, wow, the Alaska AFL-CIO, somebody put stuff here. The Alaska Nurses Association union has an archive. So you might not even know that your union has some historical documents living there, and they are accessible to you as long as you call the archives and request a visit. You can look at these things and learn about your history.
Perfect. Well, Kim, thank you so much, as always, for being a wonderful, wonderful guest on the Labor Live program. And folks, that is all for this week, but make sure to tune in next week, next Thursday, same time, same place, as we talk about the union difference and why unions are so important for American workers. So that's it for this time, but make sure to tune in next time.